It was the story of a lovely lady and a man named Bradey that became one of the most iconic sitcoms in television history. But beneath the matching outfits, catchy theme song, and squeaky clean smiles, the Bradey Bunch had its fair share of chaos, drama, and just plain weirdness. Here are 10 strange and surprising facts that even the biggest Bradey fans may have missed. You might think you know the Bradeys: 6 kids, 1 dog, and a lot of family-friendly fun. But did you know about the real-life on-set feuds, the mysterious disappearance of Tiger the dog, or the time Marcia Brady almost landed a Spielberg movie and blew it? Stick around, because the last fact and the bonus will blow your bell-bottoms off. Number 10, Greg Bradey and the boat scene that almost sank. In the free-spirited 1970s, Barry Williams, known as Greg Bradey, lived every teenage boy's fantasy. He had fame, fans, and feathered hair that could part traffic. At just 16, he was America's heartthrob, but being a teen idol had its, let's say, temptations. One lazy afternoon, Barry decided to unwind in the era's style. Let's call it recreational relaxation. You know the kind. Everything was chill until the phone rang. Urgently. It was the studio. They needed him back on set immediately. He showed up late, glassy-eyed, unsteady, and far from camera-ready. It didn't take long for the cast and crew to notice something was off. The episode in question was Law and Disorder, and Greg's big scene involved talking about a boat with his dad, Mike Bradey. But when Barry staggered across the Bradey driveway, his walk was too wobbly to ignore. His lines were flat, his timing off. The producers went into emergency mode. They quietly rewrote the script to scale down Greg's role, trimming scenes so they could shoot around his condition. Johnny Bravo, it turns out, wasn't quite hitting his marks that day. This wasn't just a funny behind-the-scenes mishap. It reflected the tightrope that many young stars walked in that era. Fame without guidance. Pressure without pause. Barry eventually wrote about the incident in his memoir, owning up to the mistake with honesty and humor. But it remains one of the weirdest moments in Bradey Bunch production history. Number 9. Cindy's blonde hair wasn't really Cindy's. And speaking of behind-the-scenes sacrifices, let's talk about Cindy Brady, played by Susan Olsen. Audiences loved her blonde pigtails and lisp. But here's the twist. Susan was naturally blonde, just not the correct shade. Producers didn't think her hair was light enough, so they bleached it regularly throughout season 1 to match their Golden Girl vision. But the harsh chemicals caused significant damage. By season 2, Susan's hair began falling out in clumps. Alarmed, the producers finally relented. They stopped bleaching and let her wear her natural color. It was a rare moment when concern for a child actor's health overruled the Hollywood aesthetic. That's just one of many times the Bradey Bunch blurred the line between the polished perfection of television and the very human flaws behind it. Take casting, for example. Number 8. Gene Hackman. Almost played Mike Bradey. Before Robert Reed became the quintessential TV dad, producers had another name on the table: Gene Hackman. Yes, that Gene Hackman. At the time, Hackman was a respected but relatively unknown character actor. The producers thought he had the acting chops to play Mike Bradey, but the network wasn't sold. Executives believed he didn't have the family-friendly face for a sitcom dad. So they passed. Instead, they tapped Robert Reed, a Shakespearean actor under contract with the studio. Ironically, Reed hated the part. He constantly battled the producers over what he saw as the show's shallow writing and cartoonish plots. So the network got its familiar face, but at the cost of nearly constant creative tension. Number 7. The disappearance of Tiger. And while talking about heartbreaks, let's not forget Tiger, the beloved Bradey family dog. Audiences adored Tiger, but few know his fate. During the filming of an episode, Tiger's trainer let him out to stretch his legs between takes. In a tragic twist, the dog was hit by a passing car and killed instantly. The show didn't stop filming. The trainer quickly found a look-alike to replace him, but the substitute dog had no training and couldn't follow commands. The result? Several chaotic scenes later, Tiger quietly vanished from the series without a word. No emotional farewell, no storyline explanation, just gone. Number 6. Baby Talk, Baby Talk came from real life. One of the most memorable lines from the show wasn't even scripted. It came from real life. Baby talk, it's a wonder you can walk. That taunt comes from the episode in which Cindy is bullied for her lisp. Viewers didn't know that Susan Olsen had a real, noticeable lisp. The writers decided to build an entire episode around it. In the story, Peter steps in to defend his little sister and ends up with a black eye. It's one of the most touching moments in the show's run, turning a childhood insecurity into a story of sibling courage and love. If you're enjoying this trip down memory lane, go ahead and tap that like button. We've got more retro deep dives and TV nostalgia coming your way. Now back to the Bradys. Number 5. The original Jan, replaced for not being blonde. Casting changes were nothing new on the Bradey Bunch. Initially, Sherwood Schwartz had cast Debbie Storm as Jan Bradey. But then came the decision to unify the look of the 3 Bradey sisters, all blonde, all American. So Storm was out, and Eve Plum was brought in. Still, Schwartz didn't leave Storm completely out in the cold. She was cast in the Season 2 episode My Fair Opponent as Molly Weber, the shy, awkward girl transformed into a beauty. It was a clever nod to what might have been had she remained Jan. Number 4. Florence Henderson accidentally walked into Star Trek. In a moment that could only happen in 1970s, Hollywood, Florence Henderson wandered into the wrong makeup room before her screen test. She sat between 2 science fiction legends, William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy. Yep, she had accidentally crashed Star Trek's prep room. She recalled that neither Shatner nor Nimoy acknowledged her presence, too wrapped up in their universe. Little did they know, the woman quietly doing her lipstick would soon become America's most iconic mom. Number 3. Robert Reed thought the show was beneath him. Robert Reed, however, had a far less warm relationship with the show. Reed was trained in classical theater and saw the Bradey Bunch as beneath his talents. He frequently clashed with creator Sherwood Schwartz, even submitting handwritten notes about lines he thought were too goofy or unrealistic. Schwartz ignored most of them. Still, Reed's desire for more serious content did help add occasional depth to the show. He wasn't wrong, the scripts could be silly, but his resistance also created ongoing tension behind the scenes. Number 2. Lucy, the party host, was also Lucy from Peanuts. Some references were subtle Easter eggs. Remember Lucy, the girl who hosted the party where Jan was wearing that ridiculous black wig? Pamela Ferdin played her, as well as Lucy's voice, in the Peanuts animated specials. Naming her character Lucy was no coincidence. It was an inside joke for animation fans and a wink to those who knew her voice. Number 1. Maureen McCormick's struggles behind the smile. Let's talk about the most famous Bradey of all, Marcia. Maureen McCormick seemed to embody everything audiences wanted in a beautiful, smart, polished teenage girl. But the honest Maureen was battling intense anxiety and self-doubt behind the scenes. After the show ended, she struggled with substance abuse and depression. She later revealed that she missed a crucial audition with Steven Spielberg for Raiders of the Lost Ark because she was too high to attend. The contrast between Marcia's perfection and Maureen's pain was a stark reminder of the pressure young stars face. Bonus fact: the rumor about Greg and Carol. And finally, the bonus fact you didn't see coming: the Barry Williams-Florence Henderson rumor. For years, gossip swirled that something inappropriate had happened between the young actor and his on-screen mom. Williams eventually admitted he had a massive crush on Henderson and invited her to dinner once. She accepted, thinking it would be a fun, harmless evening. And that's all it was, but the tabloids spun it into something far more scandalous. Henderson laughed it off for the rest of her life, calling it the dinner that launched 1,000 headlines. So there you have it. 10 weird and wild facts that reveal the 60s were abuzz with space fever, and Lost in Space cashed in on that aspect. From its quirky cast to campy style and futuristic take on humanity, the show was truly iconic. But there are many details about this show that, just like the name of the series, have been lost in space and time. From the show's involvement in the space race to the whopping budget of the show, what happened behind the sets of this show will blow your mind. Number 10. The show was meant to be darker. The show's tone was much darker initially. We all know the show as that one humorous space show from the 60s with a few serious moments sprinkled in. But the show was initially intended to be much darker and grittier. The producers of the show intended to capture the reality of what space travel could be like. Characters on the show like Mr. Smith and the robot were written with a much more serious tone and were intended for young adults more than children. Number 9. The pilot alone cost $600,000. You might be thinking to yourself, well, that doesn't seem too bad, but just hold your spaceships for a second. $600,000 adjusted for inflation gives you a whopping sum of $4.5 million. That's right, $4.5 million to shoot the pilot alone. The first episode, dubbed No Place to Hide, follows the crew aboard the Jupiter 2 and how it crash-lands on a barren planet inhabited by brutal cyclopses. And to think it was all done with zero CGI. Number 8. Dr. Smith was a filler. Dr. Smith was not supposed to be in the show for as long as he was, and was intended to only be there for a few episodes. Then what changed the producer's mind? Well, it was the acting of the amazing Jonathan Harris. Jonathan's portrayal of the backstabbing Dr. Smith made the producers want to extend his role in the show. His acting was amazing to the point he was given full creative control over his character. To just put into perspective how legendary Harris is, he was hired as Chuck Norris's vocal coach. That's right, the man, the myth, the legend himself was a student of Harris. Number 7. Tension among the cast. Now, if you thought the feud between the crew of the Jupiter 2 and the evil Dr. Smith was limited to the show alone, you'd be wrong. There were rumors that this on-screen clash had flowed over to real life between the cast and especially between Guy Williams and Jonathan Harris. As the focus of the show began to shift over from Professor Robinson, who was played by Williams, he felt that he was being cheated out of the main lead. The more screen time Harris got, the more strained the relationship between the two became. But nonetheless, both parties delivered stellar performances despite their odds. Number 6. The robot is the blueprint. The robot is one of the most memorable characters on the show. The mechanical droid that accompanies the crew of the Jupiter 2 acts as both anchor point and comedic relief. The character introduced audiences at the time to dry humor and how contrasting the behaviors of robots would be from that of humans. But there is one thing in particular that Robot in Lost in Space is known for. The robot in Lost in Space is the inspiration behind some of the most famous droids of today's day and age. C-3PO and R2-D2 from the Star Wars franchise. C-3PO and R2 are known as pop culture icons for the impact they had on the Star Wars franchise. But little do people know that the character inspiration came from the original robot from Lost in Space. I'm sure you're as surprised as we were when you heard those facts, but the next 5 are even crazier. So before we check them out, make sure to drop a like. Number 5. The man behind the soundtrack. Those who have watched Lost in Space would realize just how amazing the soundtrack is. The opening theme song in particular is so very iconic that you can tell that Lost in Space is playing from the first few notes. But little do people know that it was the legendary John Williams. Although the original pilot episode's theme song used Bernard Herrmann's soundtrack from The Day the Earth Stood Still, Williams is the one who composed the initial theme song that ran for the first 2 seasons and recomposed the theme song for the 3rd season to show the shift from a more dark to a bright and comedic setting. Number 4. The Caped Crusader Next Door. While Lost in Space is certainly one of the most famous TV series of all time, it was the show that was being shot in the neighboring studio that ended up stealing the spotlight of the 60s. It was none other than The Batman. Adam West's Batman was being shot right next door to where Lost in Space was, and the two casts and crews would often run across each other. This often allowed for an exchange of ideas between the two production crews, and they would often remodel and use props from each other's shows. It can't be denied that both shows had a heavy influence on each other and remain as a testament to the 60s ingenuity of storytelling and cinematography. Number 3. Recognized by NASA. NASA is the American government's top authority on all matters related to space and is responsible for putting a man on the moon just 5 years after the pilot aired. NASA truly created history with the Apollo 11 launch in 1969 and definitively won the space race against the Soviets. But what do the real-life government organization NASA and our quirky little space show have in common, you ask? Well, NASA itself has recognized June Lockhart, the actress who played Maureen Robinson. They awarded her the Exceptional Public Achievement Award. She is the only actress in history to win this award, and because of how much she influenced many young children to pick a career in science. Number 2. Committed to quality. If there's one thing you could say about Lost in Space, it's that it still holds up to this day considering its age and the severe limitations they faced compared to today. The cast and crew were dedicated to delivering consistent and high-quality episodes, and the budget was definitely a reflection of that. Lost in Space had the highest budget per episode, coming in with a whopping $130,000 per episode, which is equivalent to over $1 million in today's money. We can see that the production wasn't willing to skimp on quality and expanded the budget as needed. You just don't see the sort of dedication you did with this show in today's media, regardless of how massive the budget is. Number 1. The Lost Animated Show. It's funny when you say it out loud. Nonetheless, it has to be told. Lost in Space has an entire spin-off that is completely lost. The show had gotten the green light for a completely animated show in 1972, but never went into production. The only proof that such an idea even existed is the test footage for the show that was leaked. This has become something of an urban legend with many fans of the show. Many actually theorize that almost a full season was made, but the test footage was the only thing that got leaked. So now efforts are being made by internet sleuths to find the lost footage of what could have been the greatest animated show of the 70s. Bonus fact: bigger than Star Trek. The ship of the crew, the Jupiter 2, actually cost more to make than the Star Trek's Enterprise. This is because the interior of the Jupiter 2 was much more detailed and more functional than the Enterprise. The final figure comes up to nearly $2.6 million by today's standards. From the budgets massive enough to construct a rocket to the recognition from NASA itself. In the 1970s, one television show redefined the limits of science fiction. The $6 Million Man didn't just entertain, it made people believe in the future of human enhancement. It was action, tech, and sci-fi all rolled into one muscular, slow-motion package. But what if we told you the story behind the scenes was even stranger than what aired? You know the sound, that iconic as Steve Austin jumps 20 feet in the air. You've seen him punch through walls, run at lightning speed, and track enemies with his bionic eye. But what you probably didn't know is that the man behind the bionics, Lee Majors, did his own stunts and paid the price. Or that Steve's entire origin came from a novel so dark it would have made James Bond blush. Or that a real NASA plane crash is featured in every episode's opening. Stick around, because the last fact and the bonus aren't just trivia, they're weird, wild, and absolutely unforgettable. Number 10. Steve Austin. Was originally a killer? Before Steve Austin became America's favorite bionic hero, he was something entirely different: cold, haunted, and deadly. The character originated in Martin Caidin's 1972 novel Cyborg. He worked covert black ops missions and didn't hesitate to cross moral lines. He was closer to an assassin than a superhero. When the TV series was developed, networks knew they needed something more family-friendly, so they dialed back the darkness. They stripped out the trauma, softened Steve's personality, and turned him into a clean-cut good guy with a heart of gold. The DNA of Cyborg remained, but the soul had been rewritten. What fans didn't realize was just how radical the rewrite was. The man who would become a household name had started life as a government-made killing machine. Number 9. Lee Majors was basically bionic in real life. Now let's talk about the man behind Steve Austin. Lee Majors wasn't just playing a bionic superhero, he was practically one himself. Throughout the show's run, Majors performed the majority of his own stunts. One stunt had him leaping from a helicopter into a body of water with zero doubles and no padding. He cracked ribs, tore muscles, bruised his tailbone so badly he couldn't sit for days. But he kept going. He once joked that he should have earned the $6 million salary just from hazard pay. His dedication brought a layer of authenticity to the show that fans could feel. And it wasn't lost on the crew that Majors earned deep respect behind the scenes for refusing to fake the danger. Number 8. That iconic bionic sound wasn't in the original. Now picture this. Steve Austin jumps over a fence, flips a car, and lands like a feather. You hear the iconic bionic sound effect that still makes people sit up in their seats today. But did you know that the sound wasn't part of the original plan? In early episodes, including the pilot, there were no sound effects during the action. Steve would run and leap in dead silence. It felt weird. Producers knew something was off. Eventually, they added the now legendary ch-ch-chase sound, using manipulated tape and electric guitar riffs. It wasn't high-tech at all, but it worked. That sonic signature became so iconic that it was spoofed by The Simpsons, Family Guy, and dozens of other shows. It turned slow motion into spectacle and gave Steve Austin a sound as legendary as his powers. By the way, if you're enjoying these deep dive facts, smash that like button and hit subscribe. We've got more retro gold coming your way every week, from cult classics to forgotten TV legends. Number 7. Steve wasn't supposed to have super strength. Interestingly, the show was originally supposed to stay grounded in plausible science. Steve Austin was meant to have enhanced speed, sight, and hearing, but not strength. The writers and consultants wanted the technology to feel realistic. But then the fan mail started rolling in. Kids loved watching Steve punch through walls and lift cars. The stunts that broke the laws of physics were what got people talking. So the writers gave in. Super strength was added. Science got benched in favor of fun. From that moment on, Steve Austin became a full-blown superhero, and ratings, they soared. Episodes started focusing less on spy work and more on sheer spectacle. Realism took a back seat, and it was the right call. Even if science didn't check out, fantasy absolutely did. If you're into this weirdness, hit that like button. Now back to the madness. Number 6. The word bionic almost got the show sued. But the show's success came with a price, especially when it came to its language. The term bionic became a household word almost overnight, and that caused problems. A biomedical company that specialized in prosthetic limbs claimed they had used the term bionic long before ABC ever aired the show. When the $6 million man went mainstream, they filed a lawsuit claiming trademark infringement. The case never made it to court. A quiet settlement was reached. But here's the kicker. The lawsuit didn't just resolve the issue. It made bionic even more famous. After that, the word exploded in popularity. It showed up in toy marketing, fitness ads, sportswear, and even dictionaries. All because of a show that almost got shut down for using it. Number 5. That crash in the opening credits? Totally real. Let's talk about something most viewers completely missed. The crash footage at the beginning of every episode. That's real. It comes from a 1960s NASA test flight involving a lifting body aircraft. The pilot, Bruce Peterson, survived the crash but was seriously injured. The producers obtained the footage legally because it was in the public domain, and they used it for every opening sequence. The fiery crash and the cockpit panic weren't simulated. It really happened. NASA even quietly helped behind the scenes during the show's development. They provided training tapes, flight data, and suit designs. Some engineers even visited the set. They didn't officially endorse the show, but they were fascinated by how it was introducing real aerospace tech to the public. Steve Austin wasn't just a sci-fi hero. He was a fictional extension of actual aviation history. That real crash? It gave the show grit. It told viewers that what they were seeing wasn't just fantasy, it was grounded in real danger. Number 4. The Bionic Boy almost got his own show. Now let's jump to something that never made it to air but almost did. The Bionic Boy. Yep. In 1978, producers filmed a pilot for a spin-off series featuring a teenage athlete who receives bionic implants after a near-fatal accident. The goal? To reach a younger audience. The character had all the powers, super speed, strength, and reflexes. They even finished a full pilot episode. But test audiences didn't bite. The show felt too kiddie, too soft, and lacked the punch of the original. Critics called it a watered-down imitation. Networks passed. The pilot disappeared for decades before surfacing in DVD extras and sci-fi retrospectives. Today, it's considered a bizarre relic of an expanding bionic universe that never quite took off. The actor left Hollywood shortly after. Sometimes, even in a world of superhumans, upgrades fail. Number 3. Steve and Jamie were sci-fi's first power couple. Steve Austin and Jamie Summers, better known as the Bionic Man and Woman, changed the landscape of sci-fi TV. Jamie, introduced as Steve's love interest, it became so popular that she earned her own spin-off on a different network. Despite that, the shows regularly crossed over, creating one of the first serialized romantic arcs in science fiction. Though a wedding episode was written, it wasn't filmed until years later in reunion movies. Their dynamic paved the way for modern shared universes like Marvel and the Arrowverse. Off-screen, the $6 Million Man became a merchandising juggernaut. Number 2. The toys outsold Star Wars. Kenner's action figure featured a magnifying eye and bionic components, and it even outsold Star Wars toys at launch. The line expanded to include Jaime's own doll series and a Bigfoot figure, based on the show's most iconic villain. Together, they created one of the first shared universe toy lines, setting the standard for generations of action figures to come. Number 1. The show's theme song was silence? Finally, let's end with the show's opening sequence. No theme song, no flashy animation, just a cold, calm narration. That voice? It belonged to actor Richard Anderson, who played Oscar Goldman. That intro wasn't in the pilot. Originally, the show opened with a traditional musical score, but test audiences felt it lacked gravity. So the producers spliced in real NASA footage, added Anderson's voice, and created what's now one of the most iconic intros in television history. Bonus fact: Steve Austin fought Bigfoot, and it was a rating smash. Of all the strange, wild, and unforgettable moments in the $6 Million Man, nothing topped the time Steve Austin went toe-to-toe with Bigfoot. Yes, that Bigfoot. In a 1976 two-part episode titled The Secret of Bigfoot, Steve discovers that the legendary creature is actually a cybernetic guardian created by aliens. Played by wrestling legend Andre the Giant and later by Ted Cassidy. When Saturday Night Fever hit theaters in 1977, it did more than just crank the disco dial to 11. It launched John Travolta into superstardom, resurrected the Bee Gees, and made white polyester suits a national fashion emergency. But behind the flashing lights and iconic soundtrack lies a treasure trove of stories, strange, hilarious, and totally unexpected. Think you know Saturday Night Fever? Think again. For all the strutting and staying alive, this film hides some truly weird secrets, like the fact that the article it was based on was a total fabrication, or that the world's most famous dance floor was auctioned off for 7 figures, or that a grieving John Travolta had to finish scenes days after the love of his life passed away. Yeah, this isn't just a disco movie. It's a strange time capsule from an even stranger era. And once we pull back the curtain, you'll never watch it the same way again. Stick around till the last fact and the bonus for the proper Saturday Night Fever. Number 10. A movie born from a lie. Let's rewind. The entire movie wouldn't exist if not for a 1976 article published in New York Magazine titled Tribal Rights of the New Saturday Night. It was gritty, stylish, and supposedly non-fiction, detailing Brooklyn's underground disco culture through the eyes of a dancer named Vincent. Hollywood went crazy for it. One small catch? Vincent was completely made up. British journalist Nick Cohn confessed years later that he fabricated much of the story. He'd only recently moved to the US and barely understood the local scene. So he did what many writers have done under deadline. He improvised, basing Vincent on a mod friend from his London youth. And just like that, a global phenomenon was born from a lie. Number 9. The Bee Gees wrote the soundtrack without seeing the film. Here's the kicker. The Bee Gees hadn't even seen the movie when they wrote the songs. They were in France working on an entirely unrelated album when producer Robert Stigwood called. He needed music, fast. So over one weekend, the Gibb brothers wrote multiple songs without a script, without footage, and without context. And those scenes where Travolta grooves down the street? During filming, he wasn't dancing to Stayin' Alive at all. They used Boz Scaggs and Stevie Wonder for timing, only swapping in the Bee Gees later in post-production. Number 8. Travolta was already famous, and fans went wild. Travolta, of course, was no stranger to fame when the film began production. By then, he'd already become a household name thanks to his role as Vinnie Barbarino on Welcome Back, Kotter. But nothing prepared the production team for the tidal wave of fans that followed him to Brooklyn. The streets were swarmed, especially by teenage girls. Co-star Donna Pescow remembered that filming had to be constantly rescheduled to avoid the chaos. They often shot scenes at odd hours just to escape the mobs. Number 7. The dance floor was a $15,000 custom set piece. Now let's talk about the film's most legendary location, the dance floor. The 2001 Odyssey Disco in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, was a real club, but not like you saw it in the film. The now iconic color-shifting, flashing dance floor? That was a $15,000 set addition, built specifically for the movie. It pulsed in sync with the music thanks to cutting-edge technology at the time. After the club closed in 2005, a former employee named Vito Bruno rescued the floor. In 2017, it was auctioned off for $1.2 million to an anonymous buyer. Somewhere that floor is still lighting up. Number 6. White Castle staff got moons and barked at for real. And speaking of lighting things up, one of the film's funniest behind-the-scenes stories comes from an unexpected place. White Castle. During a scene where Tony and his crew grab burgers, the restaurant workers behind the counter weren't actors. They were actual employees. The director told the cast to improvise and instructed the staff to react naturally, and boy did they. One actor climbed on a table and barked. Another, Paul Pape, who played Double J, reportedly mooned the staff mid-take. Their shock? Totally real. That moment lives forever on screen, captured in all its chaotic, unscripted glory. Enjoying the madness so far? Then go ahead, like this video. Number 5. Travolta was grieving during filming. The energy behind Travolta's performance came from more than just music and choreography. It came from personal pain. Around that time, he had fallen deeply in love with actress Diana Hyland, his co-star in The Boy in the Plastic Bubble. Though she played his mother in the film, their off-screen relationship blossomed quickly. But tragedy struck just as Saturday Night Fever began filming. Hyland, battling breast cancer, passed away only 6 months after they got together. Travolta briefly left the production to be with her during her final moments. And then, heartbreakingly, he returned to finish shooting the film that would define his career. That electric sadness? You can feel it in every frame. Number 4. The tango hustle was made up on the spot. One of the most memorable dance scenes comes roughly an hour into the movie, where Tony and Stephanie practice a complex routine. It feels elegant, improvised, alive. That's because it was. On the day of filming, the choreographer didn't show up. With no pre-planned steps, Travolta and Karen Lynn Gorney created what's now known as the tango hustle right on the spot. They blended elements of the tango with disco rhythms, making it one of the film's most surprisingly raw moments. Though the dance never gained popularity outside the film, its spontaneity is part of what makes it so captivating to watch. Number 3. The white suit wasn't supposed to be white. Now let's talk fashion. That famous white suit Travolta wore? It almost wasn't white at all. Director John Badham and Travolta originally envisioned it in black, which is in line with real disco trends. However, costume designer Patricia von Brandenstein had other ideas. She argued that black would disappear under the club's dark lights. White, on the other hand, would pop and symbolically represent Tony's inner transformation. Turns out she was absolutely right. The glowing white suit became one of cinema's most iconic costumes, and it wasn't even part of the original plan. Number 2. Stephanie was cast because of a taxi ride. Casting Stephanie, Tony's complicated dance partner, wasn't easy. Hundreds of women auditioned, but none felt quite right. Then one day, fate did its thing. Karen Lynn Gorney, a relatively unknown actress at the time, found herself sharing a cab with a stranger. They struck up a conversation. He mentioned his uncle was working on a film. She jokingly responded, "Am I in it?" That uncle? Producer Robert Stigwood. Her name got passed along, she landed an audition, and the rest is history. Gorney became the perfect counterbalance to Travolta, grounded, smart, and just a little bit out of reach. Number 1. That famous strut? Almost not Travolta. And finally, we get to the most iconic shot of the entire film. Tony Manero's walk down 86th Street, paint can swinging to the beat of Stayin' Alive. It's stylish, timeless, pure swagger. But guess what? It almost didn't feature Travolta at all. The original plan was to shoot the legs of a stand-in. They figured no one would care about the actor's lower half. But when Travolta saw the footage, he insisted on reshooting it himself. However, not every shot in the final cut is of him. When does Tony stop and lift his shoe to compare it to the pair in the store window? That's actually a foot double. Even disco kings have limits. Bonus fact, the film was almost rated X. One of the weirdest and most overlooked facts about Saturday Night Fever is that it was this close to being slapped with an X rating. That's right, before it became a pop culture icon and a PG-rated disco fantasy in people's minds, the original 1977 release was dark, gritty, and unapologetically raw. The language was intense, the sexual content was explicit, and the themes tackled everything from racial tension to assault. In fact, the theatrical release was rated R for good reason. It wasn't just a dance movie. It was a reflection of the rough Brooklyn streets and the harsh realities young people faced. Saturday Night Fever might look like a slick disco fantasy, but the real story is messier, stranger, and way more human. It was built on a fake article, powered by music written without a script, and starred a heartbroken actor who channeled real pain into a fictional role. Bruce Willis's most iconic work is The Fifth Element. But behind the flying taxis and neon haircuts, there are many secrets about this movie that are still under wraps, with some being scary or outright disturbing. From the movie borrowing ideas from classic philosophy to the original choice for Ruby Road, what happened behind the scenes will absolutely blow your mind. Number 10. Leon the Professional. Well, what does the assassin babysitter have in common with The Fifth Element, you ask? Well, if it wasn't for the success of the former, the latter would have never happened. Leon the Professional is directly responsible for the shooting of The Fifth Element. Luc Besson, the director of both films, had the idea for The Fifth Element for the longest time, but wasn't able to pull it off because of budgeting constraints. He instead ended up directing Leon the Professional instead, which ended up becoming an international hit, which gave him the green light from many studios to spend as much money as he needed on this artistic dream of his. Number 9. Inspiration from France. The Fifth Element might seem like a campy and borderline parodical spin-off of American comics, but what people don't realize is that The Fifth Element is actually Luc Besson's take on many of the French comics that he grew up reading. As a teenager in the 70s, Luc Besson grew up reading many of the comics of his homeland, like Bande dessinée and many other sci-fi titles by prominent French comic artists like Jean-Claude Mézières and Jean Mobius Giraud. Besson was so inspired by their artwork that he hired them for the initial sketches and storyboard work. But it eventually led to lawsuits from other editors and artists who believed that Besson had plagiarized their work. Number 8. Recreating Plato's ideas. It may sound a little crazy, but The Fifth Element in essence absorbs ideas from classical philosophical ideas from the likes of Plato. But what's even more amazing is that Luc Besson also never realized this till his father told him about it. One of Plato's greatest thought experiments was that he believed that the classical elements of fire, earth, wind, and water came together to form an element higher than that of the four individual elements. Similarly, in the movie The Fifth Element, Besson played around with the idea of the combination of the four elements giving rise to the purest of all the elements, life, and using it to oppose whatever evil arises. Number 7. One crazy budget. Besson knew for a fact when he got the idea for this movie in his head that he would require a studio that wouldn't shy away from handing him a big fat check. But of course, being a relatively unknown director, no studio was willing to shell out the amounts Besson claimed that he needed for this movie. But with the success of Leon the Professional, Besson's insane budget was finally approved, and a huge budget it was indeed. Just to put it into perspective, the movie ended up going over $70 million. The only other movie to match this insane budget was the sequel to Jurassic Park, The Lost World, which was released the same year. In today's standards. Number 6. Impossible music. The Fifth Element was truly ahead of its time, with the movie being set in the 23rd century. Besson really visualized what life would be like in the far future. What would food look like? What would the world be up to? And most importantly, what would entertain the masses of the future? Besson wanted to match the score of the movie to the futuristic theme that the movie had, and told the composer for the movie, Eric Serra, to get on track. Serra ended up composing a track that was near impossible to sing. Singer Inva Mula, who dubbed the voice for Diva, the operatic singer in the show, found it impossible to change notes as fast as Serra had composed it to be. So the singer had to sing the notes individually, and it was pieced together in the final edit to create the now famous diva opera moment. Now, before we head into the top 5 facts and the surprise at the end, make sure to drop a like so that we know you were here. Number 5. What year is it again? The Fifth Element is one of those movies that is so wacky and comical in essence that it's difficult to really tell if it is an alternate reality of the present or the future. There are many moments in the movie where one might feel a connection due to the familiarity of what's happening, and most of the time otherwise, the viewer is left completely baffled. This brings us to the biggest problem fans of the movie have. No one seems to be able to agree on which year the movie takes place. While the first scene is specifically set in 1914, the rest of the movie has conflicting dates, with Corbin Dallas's alarm clock saying it's 2263, while the book maintains that it's the year 2259. Additionally, the explanation on the back of the DVD says it's 2257. Number 4. Jean-Baptiste Emmanuel Zorg. Hates it. The antagonist of this neon fiesta is a character named Jean-Baptiste Emmanuel Zorg, an evil megalomaniac who is hell-bent on bringing on the destruction of the world through the great evil that arises. The character was played by none other than the master Gary Oldman. But what most people don't realize is that Gary Oldman hates the movie. In a 2014 interview with the company Playboy, Gary Oldman revealed that out of all the roles that he has played, the role he played in this one was his least favorite. He says he can't bear the movie and its oversaturated campiness. Seems like Zorg's hatred has gotten into Oldman. Number 3. Designer clothes for everyone. Now, if you didn't know, perhaps one of the biggest crowning achievements of the movie was its fashion designing and direction. Although it was the 90s and fashion was booming, moviegoers were not ready for what they were about to see. But this begs the question, who was responsible for these ludicrous outfits? Well, it's none other than fashion maestro Jean-Paul Gaultier. Gaultier had taken on the task of clothing everyone on set, and by everyone we mean absolutely every single person on the set. If a person was in a shot, Gaultier would walk up to them, make sure his masterpiece was in its full grandeur, and only then allow the shot to be taken. He was so careful with his designs that he would even go through hundreds of extras, making sure each of their dresses was perfect. Number 2. The most extra premiere. Now, if you thought the futuristic grandness of the movie ended on set, you'd be wrong, because the premiere of the movie was just as crazy as the movie itself. While many people often just host a screening of their movie, Besson decided that it just won't be enough for his magnum opus and went all out. Besson, in addition to the screening, also set up a futuristic ballet for invitees, a fashion show by Jean-Paul Gaultier, and even fireworks. It is reported that Besson spent anywhere from $1 million to $3 million on the premiere alone. Number 1. Never crossing paths. This may come as a little surprise to you, but the protagonist of the movie, Corbin Dallas, and the antagonist of the movie, Jean-Baptiste Emmanuel Zorg, never actually even met once on set. You heard that right. It is reported that Bruce Willis, who played the protagonist, never actually met Gary Oldman on set, as all of his scenes were shot before Oldman's even began. Now, is that crazy or what? Now it's time for our bonus fact, and it is one that is truly surprising. One of the most memorable characters of the movie is Ruby Rhod, the intergalactic talk show host played by the energetic Chris Tucker. But the choice for this role wasn't always Tucker. The role was actually written for the superstar Prince, but he did not express interest in the role and wasn't flattered by the choice of attire picked for Ruby Rhod. From the movie's insane fashion wardrobe to the completely impossible music, this movie was not just a movie, it was an absolute experience for both the cast and crew. Which fact shocked you the most? Let us know down in the comments section. Also, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so that you never miss a new video.